Okay, so I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, and I figured I should just do it, then hold off until everything is right. This is more of maybe a dry run, and see how it goes. But the thought came to me that a lot of you might not know what Spinraza is unless you're like really close to me. And so what I want to do is I want to explain what it is, what it does, and also kind of use this time to refresh on my knowledge that I've went to school for. I studied biology to better understand spinal muscular atrophy. And I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of SMA and then what Spinraza does. So hold on tight. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible, but it's going to get kind of nerdy or filled with biology. So maybe, yeah, let's see how it goes. So spinal muscular atrophy is caused when a signal from the upper motor neurons up here in your brain gets sent to the lower motor neurons, but that signal doesn't reach all of the skeletal muscles that were originally targeted. And that's because there's a problem at the motor neurons. The motor neurons, or lower motor neurons, reside in the spinal cord in this little blue dot down here. And we're looking at a crosscut of the spinal cord, and the signal gets to the motor neurons, gets sent to the muscles. And then this is like a closer look. This is the body of the cell. This is the part that lives in the spinal cord, and then it has an axon that goes out all the way to the muscle. And for some, it can be very short, and for others, it's really long because this lives in the spinal cord and it has to reach muscles down in your leg, for example. So this axon can be very, very long. In SMA, the instructions are made here at the nucleus, and they're supposed to make it down here to the neuromuscular junction, where the nerve meets the muscle. But in SMA, those instructions don't make it there, and that leads to errors, things not being fixed. Think of it as adding an extension to a home without the instructions. And over time, the body will start to break this down in hopes that the instructions will be fixed and it'll be repaired. At least that's how I like to think of it. But without the instructions, this gets trimmed, this isn't being fixed, this gets trimmed, and ultimately it leads to apoptosis, death of the motor neuron, as it loses these little connections because the rest of the body thinks like, well, this isn't working, let's reset, if you will. And this is what's happening over by the nucleus. You have this very unique set of proteins that takes the instruction from your DNA, binds it to a protein, and then gives it to a motor protein that takes the instruction to where it needs to go to make that protein repair whatever. And it's called the SMN complex. In spinal muscular atrophy, the SMN complex is missing or not working correctly, and the instructions don't get bound to the IMP protein that allows the motor proteins to know what to do with it. And within cells, that's not really a big, normal cells, other than motor neurons, it's not a big deal because random collisions will eventually get those instructions to where they need to go. But in a motor neuron, since they're so long, random collisions are not going to make it, they're not going to take the instructions from the nucleus to the neuromuscular junction. So the protein is crucial, and that's why it's called the survival motor neuron protein. And this is what that motor protein looks like. Hopefully you've seen it before. If you're a bio nerd like me, you have. And I think it's like totally like one of the coolest proteins. But now we're going to dive into the genetics, which is probably my favorite part about spinal muscular atrophy. This is what I find fascinating. So within your cells, you have your genome. Your genome is separated into chromosomes that look like this, and that's your DNA bound tightly around these other proteins called histones, and then your DNA wraps around that. Those histones wrap around themselves, creating this structure to keep things organized. But this is where you have all your A, C's, T's, and G's. This is what makes up your genome, and you have billions of them. And then just to distill it a little bit further, your genes make up the instructions you need for whatever. And that is divided into two groups, the exons and the introns. Exons are the A, C's, T's, and G's, the nucleotides, that are needed to make the correct protein. Those are the ones that are expressed. The introns are just in the way. I think that's the best way to remember it, but like this is not, the introns don't code for anything. In SMA, you have 9 exons. And this is a representation of your 5th chromosome, where you find the SMN gene, the gene that causes SMA. And in people without SMA, they have 2 copies, the SMN1 and the SMN2 gene. SMA is caused when SMN1 is completely deleted, or it undergoes a mutation that makes SMN1 be exactly like SMN2. And this is where I think it's fascinating, because all those A, C's, T's, and G's that make up the SMN gene, or it makes up SMN1 and SMN2, they're exactly the same order and everything, except in this section for exon 7. In SMN2, it's a T, where on SMN1, it's a C. And this tiny change, 1 out of billions, is what leads to SMA. And it creates this cascade of other problems. And I find it fascinating. The more I understand it, the cooler it is to me. But because of their location in the chromosome, this area undergoes a lot of mutations. And so what was likely for me, as an example, is that my SMN1 gene underwent this mutation where it replaced that C for a T. And now I have multiple copies of SMN2, but no SMN1, leading to spinal muscular atrophy. And hopefully you're still with me. I find this fascinating and really cool. But your cells have this process called translation and transcription, where they take the DNA, converts it to RNA, the instructions, and that's what it's sent to other parts of the cell to make proteins or repair things, stuff like that. And that is where Spinraza comes in. There's this process called splicing, where it takes the exons, gets rid of the introns, and gives us the correct protein that the body needs to work correctly. Here we have the different exons, and then in yellow we have the introns, and the body goes in, removes the introns, and then we have the final protein. What Spinraza does is that it's this cool drug made up of those nucleotides, those A's, C's, T's, and G's. But in this case, we have a U. I'm leaving a lot of information out to try and make this as simple as possible. But what Spinraza, nusinersen, does, it goes in to the spliceosome, the protein in charge of getting rid of the introns, and it tells it to, hey, hold on 1 second, don't exclude exon 7, and instead forces it to include exon 7 into the final product. And for me, like, I wanted to understand this, all of this much better, and I just find it fascinating, and that's why I'm like giddy about getting Spinraza. I've had it before, I've seen the results, but I also have this really cool understanding of it, that I can actually see what it's doing within my motor neurons, and it gives me this comfort to know, like, okay, now it's doing this, I can focus on these other things, because SMA is a problem of the neurons, not the muscle. The problems to the muscles is like a secondary issue. But now with the primary issue fixed, or at least kind of patched, I can focus on the muscles and help both fix the problem, if you will. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting. Sorry it was so long, and if it was too technical, let me know. I would love to explain more on this, because I geek out about this. I find this stuff fascinating. I love this kind of thing, and I do want to make a video better where I go into more detail, explain things in better detail. But yeah, hopefully you found this at least interesting, and like this is why I'm this is why I'm focusing on that GoFundMe, so that I can get going on this. And also at the same time, something I forgot to mention, Spinraza fixes the problem with the gene. Now I can focus on the muscle, and one way I'm doing that is by starting my nonprofit, Cease Industries, and the purpose of it is to create assistive devices that allow other people with weak muscles be able to be more active, because the more active I am while on Spinraza, the more likely it is to be able to gain muscle back, because that's what happens in SMA. The lack of that signal going to the muscles leads to muscle atrophy because it's not being used. And I'm hoping to reverse that by allowing people with SMA to be able to be more active and have just a little bit more of support and assistance in daily tasks. So thank you for joining me on this TED Talk, and I'll see you in the next video, and hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.